everybody. Hope you're doing marvelously well. We are big, bad, and we're both in black. Back with another Fact Friday.
Yes, we
so
are.
I have a special guest you can see. Mr. Ryan Fluff Bruce.
You know what, Warren, it is always such a pleasure to come and hang out and just we have a good time, and I feel like we should do this in person at some point when the world opens back up.
I hear that. I hear human beings will soon actually be able to be within, what is the measurement? 6 feet of each other.
Yeah, I'll stand outside and I'll yell in. I'll open the door and it'll work.
So we're going to do a Fact Friday together. So you're going to get both of our perspectives on the questions. There's some good ones here. I'm looking down. The one that I thought was a really, really good start here. Do I really need acoustic treatment in my room while recording high gain guitars with dynamic mics right on the speaker grill? I'm a bedroom musician and I usually shy away from recording actual amps because I don't know what I'm doing, and also there's a convenience in amp synths. However, the times where I tried miking an amp with a 58 and with a Marshall combo, I didn't hear the room and I quite liked it. My room isn't big and it's packed with a lot of stuff. Anyway, I think the gist of that is basically, does the room have to be dead if they're literally just sticking a microphone right up against the grill and the amp's cranked? Do they have to worry about the room acoustics?
You know what? There's a lot with high gain guitars and a dynamic mic. There's a lot of wiggle room. It doesn't really matter where you put that cab. Honestly, it's not like that. A 57 or 58 is not going to be picking up the room, as he states. Yeah, it doesn't matter. If you're trying to pick up the room, get a room mic and back it up, or back that off. Do the Jimmy Page, back it way off. But for me, you can put a guitar cab pretty much anywhere, and if you're close micing it, it's going to sound like the guitar cab. So,
I agree. It reminds me, I used to work in a music store when I was a kid, selling recording equipment when I was a teenager. And I remember somebody coming in and saying that they couldn't get the amp to sound the way they wanted. So, of course, I said, well, how do you want it to sound? And they're like, well, when I walk into my room, it sounds amazing. But when I record it, it doesn't sound very good. So I was like, well, where are you putting the mic? And they're like, well, right up to the grill. And I'm like, and where are you listening where it sounds good? They're like, when I just walk in the door. So I came up, of course, I said the obvious, why don't you try putting the mic where you're standing where it sounds good? And they were like, oh, yeah. I think that sometimes we don't sort of think about these things. And I understand. I think this is a great question that was asked by somebody who's obviously a beginner at this stuff. But yeah, a mic right up against an exceptionally loud amp is going to sound like the mic up against an exceptionally loud amp. You're not going to get a lot of room in there. I mean, there might be situations where you would if it's really excessive and the amp wasn't that loud. Probably not, but great question. I'm doing a mix for a metal album at the moment. The style is a bit like Primus and has some stoner elements. I'm struggling to give the guitar some depth and excitement. What kind of reverb or trick would you recommend for metal guitars? I've already panned them left and right at about 70%, but I feel like it's missing some power and they don't sit nicely in the mix.
Missing some power. I'm glad he said that, because the first half of the description, I was like, I don't know what that means, but he wants some sauce on the guitars. For me, I would typically try to pan them a little bit more than 70% for the choruses, and then maybe bring them in for the verses.
Absolutely.
So you can get your choruses a little bigger. I'm a huge fan of using selective saturation on guitars. Or something that I love to do is I have a couple of these warm tube EQs that are like Pultec clones. I turn the EQ circuit off, but have the EQs on, and I will run my guitars through them just to get through the circuit. Warms them up, takes a little bit of the mids out, but it just adds this real nice saturation. Saturation plugin, something like, FabFilter Saturn 2, or something like a Kazrog, the transformer. You can change the True Iron. The True Iron is a really great plugin. Those are the things that I use for guitars that give give the guitars real dimension and oomph.
I do feel like a lot of it is done at the amp for me. When I was talking to like Mike Plotnikov, for instance, about guitar tones, he's like, I do everything on the amp. If I want more low end, I put more low end on the amp. If I want more high end. However, that's at the recording stage and you're compensating for something. Right. But when you're handed something that maybe doesn't have that girth that you want, you know, there's a few tricks. But I do, to start with what you're saying, I agree. LCR in modern rock, modern metal, whatever you want to call it, hard rock, whatever genre you want to put it, LCR is the most effective way. And chorus is to have one hard pan guitar here, one hard pan guitar there, nothing down the middle. That loud and pumping and keeping your kick and your snare and your vocal and your bass down the middle. There's nothing more impactful than that. That's been proven pretty much time and time again. Now, don't get me wrong, there are exceptions. I remember there was a Pantera album, wasn't there? Quite a famous one that was like almost mono guitars. I remember Rick Rubin talking about that, but it gives it a different dimension. It doesn't give it that kind of expansive explosion into a chorus that we're talking about. But with the low end, you know, multi-band compression, you can grab like a Wave C4 or anybody else's, the Fab filter, whichever one you want, and then compress the low end really evenly and then just turn it up so it's consistently hitting. Because one of the biggest problems, as you know, with like low tune stuff is low end just going out of control. 1 minute it's just booming, and the next minute it's non-existent. It's like, oh, Georgia, diggy, 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 oh, Georgia. And it's just like super out of control. And so what the tendency to do is like you want to control the low end, so you bring the low end down. And then, of course, the whole guitar has no low end. So multi-band or dynamic EQs, I think, are really, really good for controlling the low end. But like, you know, ultimately, if you've got the opportunity to record it the way you want, that's always the most preferable thing. Yeah.
Also,
I agree.
Yeah. Also, we have no idea what this music actually sounds like. So.
Yeah. But I know what you mean. Saturation can be really good. And I think, I think the Kazrog gets name checked a lot. I think it's a very smart
very good
tool. I agree. Yeah. Do you ever, or have you ever, used a sansamp bass driver as the primary method of recording bass guitar? And if so, what settings do you like?
Back in the day, I had an RBI, a rack mount RBI, and that thing was unbelievable sounding. Couldn't tell you the settings. Don't remember. Actually, it would depend on the bass. If I was using a Stingray versus a P bass, something like that. But I do remember I would have the blend all the way up and then take a DI, as opposed to having the blend at like half and then blending the DI itself coming from the sansamp. I would use full up sansamp mix, blend it with the DI, and have a little bit of drive and compress it together with the DI, and it was heavenly. I actually really miss that RBI. It was a really great for bass tones.
That was that the 1-inch rack mount silver one.
That's the one.
Yeah, those are good. I still see them in a lot of studios in LA. People use them. I agree. I don't know if I still have it, but I had the black and yellow, you know, square looking one. And I would print a clean DI, a sansamp, and then of course the amp. So I'd actually get 3 sources and sometimes 4 sources if I was double miking the amp. And I agree. I think it's pretty much common practice. I've been talking about it personally for the last 6 years of doing YouTube. Sure you have as well. I think it's common practice to always get a clean DI, because a clean DI will give you consistent, powerful low end. I'm not a big fan of distorting low end unless it's for effect. If I want to have like a bass in a verse going and have it be all really gritty and disgusting and have the low end kind of farting out, great. But as soon as I put guitars on that, it's not reinforcing the low end.
Right.
It's good in solo against the drums, maybe one guitar. But when I've got big guitars in there, I want a consistent, powerful low end. So that really is always going to come from a clean DI. And it's interesting, no matter who I talk to, obviously Jens Bogeren and Christian Kohler, when we did a talk with them a few weeks ago, everybody's saying the same thing. Clean DI, consistent low end, then you can use a sansamp, an amp, different saturations, all that to give you the hair, the grit above the bass. But you want that low end to be really consistent. So to answer that question directly, yes, a sansamp would be great to record, but I still, as you're saying, I agree, you still want to you still want to get a good, clean DI signal if you want to get a good bass tone.
Yeah.
As a content creator, how does your workflow differ from when you were just a producer or an engineer or a musician? That's a good one for you, fine sir, because as everybody, well, not everybody, but I'm sure most people know, you are a guitar player in a successful band. You have Dragged Under, you tour a lot. I assume you're probably going to get back on the road sooner rather than later. Yeah. And you're making an album, but then you're also a quote unquote content creator.
Content creator. You know, for me, the differences are, you know, a lot of guys like to, and we would all love to have the time as content creators to, you know, I get asked all the time, why don't you have real drums? And because I do these full mix demo examples, like, you know, 60-second thing. If I'm demoing like a guitar or an amp, and people are always like, how come you should just use real drums like Glenn? It's like, okay, yeah. So I just have a drummer on standby sitting in the closet when I'm tracking the thing at 8 o'clock at night randomly when I feel like it. Like, yeah, okay. So for me, if you're on the content side, things I don't want to. I hate this term, but good enough is not out of the realm of reality, because people are going to be watching whatever I do on a cell phone anyway. There's a time and a place to be picky about your snare drum tone, your kick drum tone, your overhead phase, if you're making a record. So I'm going to go ahead and just shameless plug here.
Please, shamelessly plug.
I'm going to shamelessly plug. We have a course that we're going to put out that I made. I spent a lot of time on. It's going through my process of the mix thing that I just described. It's called the Creator's Guide to Recording and Mixing, and really it's outlining that and kind of threading that needle through that area of, okay, well, let's manage our time, let's be effective, but also be able to get out the thing that you want to get out if you are a content creator, right? So, you know, if you're going to do a guitar demo, well, let's build up some drums. Let's use maybe some MIDI drums, some MIDI bass, get some guitar tones, and make some decisions. And then we put all of that together from scratch. And then at the very end of it, you are left with a wonderful template to then use for your future stuff. So you don't have to rebuild a session every single time you want to make some content with your music. And I don't know, I'm really proud of it, how it came out. It's about 3 hours long and it's awesome. And shameless plug.
I agree. I think my perspective as a quote unquote content creator is like, I do a lot of like gear demos, and one of my big things is I want to sort of bust any kind of myths that you can't make a good or great sounding recording unless you've got really expensive gear. And sometimes I obviously get to mess with compressors that are like $3,000.
You're sitting in front of a beautiful console. You're like, I don't need that.
Yeah,
it doesn't hear me.
But at the moment, you know, we're talking through an ID44, and we do a good portion of our demos through that. So we got like this little thing, or an ID14, or a point is we get to use these inexpensive interfaces. I like breaking down myths and barriers to entry, quite frankly, that, you know, only a Gibson Les Paul going through with a $2,000 cable going into a, you know, vintage Marshall, bloody blah, blah, mic'd by a so-and-so is going to sound great. You know, it probably does sound really, really good.
Sure.
But does it mean that only with that really expensive gear, is that the only way you're going to make great music? Heck no. You know, we all know it's the song, and the song, absolutely. So for me, yes, as a content creator, I tend to record things quite, I wouldn't say punk rock, but just basic. Like throw up the mic, record it, let people hear for themselves. And if I was maybe putting it out on a record, you know, I might spend longer mixing it.
Of course.
Quite frankly, but that doesn't really help people, does it? Because they need to sort of hear the raw tracks, maybe a bit of brightness, a bit of low cut, you know, some high passing, just to stop the low end blowing out. But yeah, I want my demos to sound, you know, I want people to download the multi-tracks and reproduce what I've done pretty easily to know that it's not smoke and mirrors. So I'm excited about your course. And so tell us a little bit more about it. You're going to be getting into basically what it's like to do what you do and create the content for it?
I basically start with a blank project. I show an example of like a demo, one of the videos. Like I show an example, like here's what I'm talking about. I show it. I open up a blank Logic project and we start from scratch. Throw an instance, like in this case, I use Get Good Drums, Tune Track Easy Bass if you want to do MIDI bass. And each section is basically divided up into each phase of what I would do if I had to create the template that I work out of every single time. And so we go into programming drums. We change the feel of the riff. I write an original riff in real time, all the warts, screw ups, I change it. Like, well, it'd be cooler if we followed this. So like I change it. We come up with a top line melody for the riff. We program the bass and then we go into mixing the individual elements of the tune. And then I just show them what I do, and we talk about it along the way. It's pretty cool. It's informative. I've always wanted to make this course. Like I've wanted to make it for a long time because I get asked all the time from young creators of like, well, how do you do this or how do you do that? Like, because this other video, like in this big giant studio, but that's not really applicable to me. So I think there's a little bit of a gap now as a result of the whole YouTuber audio thing. And so I don't know. It kind of addresses that area a little bit. So
amazing.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited.
Thank you. Me too.
Well, this has been a lot of fun as usual. It's always good to have any excuse to talk to you.
Always. Thank you so much, Warren.
Thank you. Please, if you've got any experiences that this resonates with you, please leave some comments and questions below. And of course, this is the place to leave future FAQ Friday questions. Frequently asked questions. I can't believe I said FAQ questions. Anyway, so leave them down below. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, of course, Fluff. You rock.
Thank you
so much.
Have a marvelous
time recording, mixing, and content creating.
Bye, creators.